I'm trying something new today. I've got my questions on my phone. Good afternoon and welcome to BookBeat. Reading books is the key to an enlightened society. You want a key light back there, right?
I'm just gonna borrow this.
I think we're about ready, aren't we, Jesse? Good. BookBeat is a show about books and book readers.
A very odd combination of topics.
We interview book club members. How are your books chosen? And film their discussions.
Trying to find happiness and love in her life.
We also provide tips for forming book clubs
I think you just have to find a group of interested book readers.
and books that are current that might be enjoyable to read. In a society where everything is instantaneous, we're losing that sense of depth that reading can bring that other media doesn't. My name is Sue Ellen Zagrabelny. Well, I can't guarantee Oprah, but I can guarantee Channel 20. Look for BookBeat Sundays at 5 p.m., repeated Monday at 1 a.m. and 9 a.m. on Channel 20. See you then. Hello and welcome to BookBeat. Today our guest is Lorna Landvik, comedian and author. Welcome, Lorna.
Thank you so much.
Let's start with your background. How did you come to writing and how did you come to comedy?
I knew from a very early age that I wanted to do both. My first goal was to be a writer when I learned how to read in the first grade with the Dick and Jane books, which totally captivated me, and I thought, I want to write that sort of magic. I also found that I loved to perform. So I went forward always thinking, I'm going to be a novelist and I'm also going to be an actor, and we'll see how that works out. So I always just worked toward those two goals.
Who inspired you?
Boy, when I was a kid, books inspired me. As far as performers, I was a big early fan of Johnny Carson, Red Skelton. I loved Lucy, all those great television sitcoms, Andy Griffith. Loved that gentle sort of humor. I was inspired by life, I think. Anybody who could make me laugh, anybody who could move me, I wanted to emulate those sorts of people.
Do you have a favorite author?
I don't. I have so many. It would be really hard to choose. I know people have asked me, well, if you had to choose, who would it be? Like, if you were going to die, who would you choose? And I would probably choose, if I were faced with death, To Kill a Mockingbird.
Okay.
And I had the privilege of reading that book for the first time in 8th grade, and it was taught in Minneapolis, my Minneapolis public school, by a teacher from Birmingham, Alabama, whose name happened to be Mrs. Harper, and who brought all her Southern background into the classroom. So it was really a many-layered reading experience. But I can still sit down with that book and, the first paragraph just captivates me and draws me in.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Would you talk about your own body of work? I've looked at several of your novels, but I'd like to hear from you about what you've written.
My own body of work is very shapely. I have, my 10th book will be coming out this fall, and I'm thrilled about that because it, for the first time, has some autobiography in it. And all of my books, from my first book, Patty Jane's House of Curl, to my current one, have very strong Midwestern sensibility. Most of them are set in Minnesota. There's a few exceptions to that rule, but my book that's going to be published is called Best to Laugh, and it's about a young woman in Hollywood trying to forge a stand-up comedy career, and that certainly parallels what I did in my early 20s. So it was really fun to go back to those days in Hollywood, go back to Peyton Hall, the most fabulous apartment complex we lived in, with an Olympic-sized pool designed by Douglas Fairbanks and palm trees embossed on the walls. And Hollywood Boulevard was my neighborhood. That was the street the complex was on. So it was really fun to write about that time in my life, although the main character's totally unlike me. But I would say that all of my books, I love when people tell me what my themes are, because I don't know when I write them. All I want to do is take people for a good ride and tell a good story. But I hear often that I write about community. I love when men read my books, because I, am aware that some of my titles aren't exactly welcoming to men, like, yeah, I'll have that Angry Housewives eating bonbons, please, and wrap it up with Patty Jane's House of Curl. But I love when men are, a little more enlightened to go beyond what may seem like a title that will not appeal to them, because what I want to do, my goal is to just write about life. That's my genre. And if I can have comic undertones, all the better. But because I'm writing about life, I'm going to be writing about sadness and tragedy and, everything in between.
I guess that brings me to my next question, is how do you choose your subject matter? You mentioned this latest book is autobiographical, and so how do you choose what subject, or does the subject choose you?
Yes, the subject chooses me. I would say that the majority of my books begin when the 2 or 3 main characters come into my head. I have no idea who they are. They come with their names, which is very polite of them, and they often bring the title. So I remember when I first started writing Patty Jane's House of Curl, and the 2 sisters, Patty Jane and Harriet, came into my head, and I thought, oh, well, who are you? And what's a house of curl? And I thought, well, I'm going to find out, because when the characters come into my head, I'm given enough of a glimpse of their personality that they intrigue me, and I want to know more. So, and then with the title, I'm given okay, this has to do with the beauty salon. My second book, Your Oasis on Flame Lake, it took me, a couple minutes to wonder what an oasis on Flame Lake was, and then I realized, oh, it's a nightclub in a guy's basement that he opens up for his friends and neighbors. So the beginnings of the book are very, not wacky to the point of needing medication, but just they're like an unhinging of my imagination. And I know my job is to not batten the hatches, just to let that imagination flower and see what happens. And then it gets to be a little more me steering the boat. When I learn more about the characters, I start writing in directions that I think the character should go, and often they're very amenable to that and will follow my lead, but other times they'll just revolt and, no, we're going to do this and that. So my writing is always very much a process of going forward, learning something, going back, changing things, going forward again. It's, it's not a smooth whizzing ride down 94. I take a lot of side roads. And
do you write every day then?
That's my goal. My goal is also to exercise every day. Do I often achieve that? I try. I really, On the rare days that I don't write, I think of those as my percolation days, where I'm just really thinking things through. And Minneapolis has a fabulous river dog park. So I take my most handsome dog in the world often to that dog park, and just out in the woods I can think. And so I cut myself slack if I'm not writing every day, but I really try to. Then those rare percolation days, I consider them necessary, and I get a gold star on my calendar.
Absolutely.
I'm trying something new today. I've got my questions on my phone. Good afternoon and welcome to Book Beat. Reading books is the key to an enlightened society. You want a key light back there, right?
I'm just gonna borrow this.
I think we're about ready, aren't we, Jessie? Good. Book Beat is a show about books and book readers.
A very odd combination of topics.
We interview book club members. How are your books chosen? And film their discussions.
Trying to find happiness and love in her life.
We also provide tips for forming book clubs
I think you just have to find a group of interested book readers.
and books that are current that might be enjoyable to read. In a society where everything is instantaneous, we're losing that sense of depth that reading can bring that other media doesn't. My name is Sue Ellen Zagrabelny. Well, I can't guarantee Oprah, but I can guarantee Channel 20. Look for Book Beat Sundays at 5 p.m., repeated Monday at 1 a.m. and 9 a.m. on Channel 20. See you then.
You also do stand-up comedy.
Well, I wouldn't, that's how a
Is
lot of
that-
people describe
describe
it,
it,
but I did do stand-up comedy in Hollywood and other parts of California, but what I most like to do is improvisational comedy. In fact, my stand-up, I was always advised, you have to do the same act, you gotta really, hone your act, but I just like to add new things every single time. And when I moved back to Minneapolis, I worked with Dudley Riggs, and it was so much fun. And I had done a lot of improvisation in LA too, but it's just thrilling to be on stage, not knowing what's going to happen. And it was always so much fun to work with people doing that. And then I thought, how would it be to do it by myself when I don't have anyone to rely on and to pick up some slack, if slack indeed sags. So at the Bryant Lake Bowl, they've given me an opportunity to do I do a yearly show there, and it's all made up every day, every night, and it's called Party in the Rec Room, and I make up characters based on audience suggestions.
Oh my goodness, that
Yeah.
must be a challenge.
It's a really fun challenge, even though sometimes I'm backstage, picking out a wig and a pair of glasses or something, and I'm thinking, what am I doing? But I know that I have to figure it out once I go back on stage.
So you're just going with nothing prepared.
Right. I might ask, give me your favorite perfume. Somebody yells out, Jungle Gardenia. I might say, give me somebody in the news. Somebody might say, Michelle Bachmann. And give me a favorite slogan, never give up. Then I would have to incorporate all those suggestions into a scene. And we would see what would happen.
Yeah. Do you have a preference? Do you prefer doing improv to writing, or are they both speaking to you?
If that mean person asked me if I had to choose one or die, I would choose the writing, because I get to do everything when I'm writing. I'm the director, I'm the actor, I'm the set designer. I get to create the whole story. But performing is just a really fun outlet. I get to be in front of people, I get to hear their immediate reaction, whereas when I'm writing, often, not often, all the time, I'm, not sitting next to somebody when they're reading one of my books. How'd you like that? Well, that's a good chapter, huh? So I like the immediate response. I like just being out in front of people. It's a very good antidote to the solitude of writing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite work of the ones that you've written?
No, and it's such a cliched answer. A lot of writers say they're like my kids, but that's really how you feel. And if I chose one, I would be a bad mother. My first book will always be important to me because it was the first, like the first birth, and I actually survived it. And just trying to get it published, that was just such a job. And it, I think, garnered about 30 rejections. And
oh my goodness.
I just really had to, keep that flame of confidence going when it seemed the world was very eager to blow it out. And so my memories of that first book, its conception, its writing, I wrote it all in longhand, and then typed it up on a very loud, clackety typewriter. My memories of that are just a little more vivid because it was my first. I have a book that's set in the Great Depression called Oh My Stars, and that's very dear to me in that it reminds me a lot of my mother, and that was the first book she didn't live to read, and she was, as mother should be, my biggest fan. And the book's title actually comes from her favorite saying, and my mother never swore, but when you heard her say, "Oh my stars," that was close. But they all mean different things to me. I like them all for different reasons. Even the icky characters I have an affection for because I like to think I know what made them be icky. And icky, how's that for a word?
That's a good word. That's a good word.
So I really don't have a favorite. I always am most excited about what I'm currently working on.
Mm-hmm.
So,
can you talk a little bit about Angry Housewives eating bonbons? That
Yes.
has just fascinated me.
that book was inspired in a different way. It didn't come to me with the title and a couple of the main characters coming into my head. Its inspiration was having visited many book clubs. And when my first book came out, Oprah Winfrey hadn't started her televised book club, which just, burst open book clubs. It seemed like everyone was getting into a book club then. I knew that book clubs existed, but, every block didn't seem to have one, as they almost do now. So I got invited to go to a book club. Somebody called me up for my first book, and I thought, wow, this is really fun. And then I went after that to so many, and I thought, I want to write a book about a book club. And it's such a community, and there are male and female book clubs, co-ed book clubs. I've been to a few, but primarily all of the ones I've been to have been all female. And I remember one guy telling me, we'd have it at our book club, which is all male, but we only read military books, and I haven't written one of those yet. So I wanted to write a book about a book club, but I wanted them closer in physically on each other's lives. So I made up a cul-de-sac in South Minneapolis that abuts Minnehaha Creek, and because I just really wanted them in on each other's lives on a day-to-day basis, and it spans 30 years. So I wanted to begin with them as young women and deciding, hey, this would be really fun to get together and talk about a book, and then we go through all those years and see all the many changes in their lives. There's a character named Merritt who seems to have everything from society standpoint. She's physically lovely. She's married to a young, dashing doctor, and yet he beats her behind closed doors. Nobody knows what her life is behind those closed doors, and she's so timid about her own choice and her own opinions that when it's her turn to pick a book, she'll go automatically to, like she picked Airport by Arthur Haley, a bestseller, because she didn't have enough conviction in her own taste. She had to let society tell her, okay, we're all reading this. And then she gradually changes and grows so much that she ultimately picks only books that were censored because she's not going to allow anyone to tell her what to read. So it was really fun to travel with these women through their young motherhood up to the point where their kids are graduating high school and going to college, and just seeing the many different roads all these women go down. I had a lot of fun with that book.
It sounds like fun. The book Mayor of the Universe, I just started reading that recently. And could you talk about that a little bit, please?
Yes, that would have been my third book. I had started writing that, and it was about a mild-mannered actuary. And I had originally set it in Minneapolis, and I had no idea where this was going to go because the title had not yet come into my head. But this very strong character had a lonely man who, as a boy, to combat his loneliness, would create fabulous fantasies for himself to be the hero in. And so I'm writing this book and thinking, oh, okay. And then one night, after weather stripping his bedroom, because the Farmer's Almanac foretells early winter, he wakes up in his boyhood bedroom to find the room is teeming with aliens. And I think, whoa, aliens, this is going to be so much fun. And my editor at the time asked to see 50 pages. And the way I work, I really like to write the whole book and not show anyone, because there's so much change that goes on while I'm writing. I don't want to give, 100 pages to someone and have them say, I don't like this guy, or this isn't believable to me. And that undermines my confidence that I, can tell the story. But my editor wanted to see those 50 pages, and she was my editor, and so I had to do what she asked. And a couple days later, she called me back, and she said, there seems to be aliens in this book. And I said, I know, isn't that exciting? And she said, you can't write about aliens. And so rather than argue my point, because I really hadn't started writing about aliens at all, they had just come onto the scenes, but I put that book away where, in a desk drawer where it percolated all those years. And then I was on a whirlwind book tour through the Dakotas, and I was in Pierre, South Dakota, and I thought, oh wow, this is where aliens would land if they chose a city to land in, because it's kind of built in a basin and there's all these scrubby, lonely hills surrounding it. So I spent the next day just wandering around Pierre to get the lay of the land, and decided to set the book there. When I finished it, and I had so much fun with it, and so much fun writing about Lodge 1212, which is the in my imagining, all aliens belong to lodges, and they have their particular missions. And the mission of the lodge that Fletcher Weschel, the main character, gets wrapped up with, they're the cosmic cut-ups. They just are on a pursuit of deep and serious fun. And so Fletcher gets to relive his boyhood fantasies as an adult. And then, of course, being an adult, all sorts of not so fun entanglements might occur with those fantasies. And again, my publisher still didn't want to publish a book that had aliens in it. They thought it wasn't a Lorna Landvik book. And I assured them, yeah, it is, I wrote it. So I decided to do what a lot of writers have done and self-publish it. And I'm not a good self-publisher in that I'm, my heritage is Norwegian Lutheran, and we don't believe in promotion, that don't toot your own horn. So I'm thrilled that when my new book comes out this fall, Best to Laugh, the University of Minnesota Press is doing that, and they're re-releasing Mayor of the Universe. So that'll get a nice second chance, because also I've come to realize this with a lot of self-published books, there's a lot of typos slip in, and I thought I had had a pristine copy, but when the book came out there were typos, and I'm convinced that aliens got in there and just decided to goof around. So I'm just thrilled that it's going to get out in the world to on a bigger scale.
Oh, self-publishing.
Yes.
Also self-promotion.
Yes.
How did that work?
It works very well for some people, but it's a lot of work, and I like to do the writing. I don't like to do the hey, buy my book, hey, blah blah. It's just not an innate part of my personality, and I try to be better at it at the promotion. But if I want to be in front of people, I would rather be doing it as a performer, not a sales rep. Mm-hmm. So I admire people who have self-published and who know marketing and are good at it, but right now that's not a special skill of mine. So I'm just happy to give my work to a publisher and let them handle. I mean, I will certainly do what I can to make sure it breaks all sorts of sales records throughout the world and the universe. But I just like somebody else to be in charge of the promotional stuff. I want to be in charge of the writing stuff.
Yes, that's why God made editors and sales reps. Talk about being a Norwegian Lutheran. How has that informed your writing?
Wow. Well, I was raised in the Lutheran Church, and I am 100% Norwegian. And a lot of people, when I've traveled with on book tours, I've heard this question. I can't tell you how many times. And they'll say after they hear me talk, "Oh, your background is Norwegian," and I'll say, "Yeah," and they'll say, "Oh, I thought I find you really funny," and I'll say, "Well, thank you." But you said you're Norwegian. So there's, I think, a perception of Scandinavians as, a little bit dour at times, and, very Ingmar Bergman-esque. But I always point to Victor Borge, who was hilarious. He was a Dane, and my family has a very good sense of humor. But, sometimes we have to warm up for people to realize it. But I was raised with parents who loved good storytelling. Had a lot of Lutheran ministers in my family, know a lot of really good hymns, and have been to Norway twice. The first time when I was just 17, and my best friend and I decided to travel Europe after high school, before we went on to school, and Norway was our first stop. And because we were traveling and we had no set itinerary, we didn't spend any real time in Norway. We just went south of Oslo. So about 5 years ago, I took my family and we went and visited, fourth cousins up in their lodges. And I just think Scandinavia is a spectacular place with a particular affinity to Norway. It seems like they know how to handle life.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
It sounds like a really wonderful upbringing, and the trips sound very fulfilling to get to see your roots. Would you talk about another of your books? Can you?
Sure. Let's see. I'll give little synopses of
That
all
would
of
be
them.
great.
Okay. Patty Jane's House of Curl is about two sisters in South Minneapolis who start a beauty salon because Patty Jane's husband is suddenly gone missing, and they need, some sort of income. So Patty Jane starts a beauty salon, which ultimately becomes a real salon, where her sister Harriet plays the harp during, hours. They start having classes there, speakers, so it becomes a real salon. My second book, Your Oasis on Flame Lake, is about a nightclub. A guy starts in his basement because he's aware of, wow, the mailman's got a really good voice, and he just wants a place where people can relax and entertain one another. And that book is narrated in 5 different voices: 2 men, 2 women, and a young girl. And people have asked me, is it hard to write, in a male voice? And I think my job is to write about whosever voice happens to want to speak. And it did help a little when I wrote the male parts, if I would, sit around in my underwear and ask my husband to make me a sandwich. But it's really fun to write as a man, I think. My third book, Tall Pine Polka, Hollywood comes to a very small northern Minnesota town and disrupts everyone's life. And that was really fun to write because I had lived so long in Hollywood. My fourth book originally was called Hey Pal, and that was the greeting that the young boy who has Down syndrome, he would greet the world that way. And I had to change the title, and it became Welcome to the Great Mysterious. That book is about a Broadway diva, again, a very fun part to write about, who's called by her fraternal twin sister to take care of her nephew who has Down syndrome, while his parents take up this opportunity to go to Italy. So she does, and when Rich, the boy, had come into my head, I was scared. I thought, I can't write about you. I don't know anything about Down syndrome. And his comment to me really was, that's your problem. It's not mine. This is who I am. You find out more about it. So I did read some books, and then just gave him the freedom I give my other characters to let him really tell me his own story. And again, that sounds so, what? Ooh, you're in charge. But again, I think it's just the unhinging of the imagination. My fifth book was Angry Housewives, Eating Bonbons, the book about a book club. My sixth book was Oh My Stars, and that's the book that's set in the Great Depression, and its main character is a very tall, gangly, young, well, at 16, she's working in a thread factory in Kentucky, and she loses her arm in a machine accident at the elbow, which destroys all her dreams that she had of escaping Kentucky. And she was very good with her hands, and had thought, maybe I'll be a fashion designer or something. And she retreats to the library and reads everything, books as well as almanacs, and there at the library she reads about the construction of the Golden Gate Bridge and then the subsequent first suicide, and she decides to be the second. Her life is so grim, and she takes a bus to San Francisco, but in North Dakota the bus hits one of the few trees in that state, and that totally changes her life. One of her rescuers is a guy who's in a band, and she aligns herself with this band that's an integrated band, which is very rare in those times, and it's just a wild and woolly excursion book. That book was a lot of fun to write. After that came The View from Mount Joy, and that book is also narrated by a man, and it's about a guy who comes to Minneapolis from a small town in his senior year in high school, and he meets two girls who remain pivotal to his life. One's a diabolical cheerleader and another sort of a bohemian hippie, and he ultimately ends up running a grocery store, which he turns into a real place of community. He'll have contests, when noticing a shopper who's got to only pick the boxed macaroni and cheese because she's really fallen on hard times. He'll announce a supermarket sweep where she can, amass a lot of groceries. And that was a lot of fun to write. Then came a book called 'Tis the Season. That's a holiday book about a young woman who's been at a rehab center, sort of like Hazleton, and all the amends she has to make with people. And that's written entirely in emails.
Oh my goodness, that must be
That was a fun way to write.
Yeah.
Then there was the Mayor of the Universe, and upcoming is Best to Laugh.
Oh, that's fun. Can you give us a little hint of what Best to Laugh is about?
Well, the young woman is on Hollywood Boulevard trying to pursue a career in comedy. The biography in it, I changed a lot of, but I did happen to have when you're trying to perform or write, you often have to have regular jobs to pay the rent. So I waitressed a lot, I temped a lot, but to temp in Los Angeles is pretty exciting. You get sent to movie studios and talent agencies and record companies, and I did have a job for about 5 months where I worked at the Playboy Mansion.
Oh my goodness.
Strictly clerical. But that was a real experience. And so in my book there might be a Playboy-like mansion that may be called the Rogue Mansion, where she gets to work. And so again, it was just so much fun to go back in time to that time. The complex that we lived in, Peyton Hall, had been the pied-à-terre of a lot of actors, who didn't want to drive out to their, estates if they were shooting movies. So Clark Gable had lived there, Claudette Colbert, Shelley Winters, all the, it just reeked of Hollywood history. And of course, they had to tear it down. Okay. And we as tenants had formed a tenants union, and we're fighting to have it declared a historical monument. But we lost, and it is now a huge, ugly box high-rise. So throughout the years, I have at least 2 or 3 dreams a year about Peyton Hall, half in existence, half of it still torn down. There are squatters still in the back, and it's as if I've never really reconciled with that place being torn down. And, symbolically, I'm sure it's the tear down of so many people's dreams. And so I would be writing a scene that was set at the pool, and I would, come out of my office all bleary-eyed and, tell my husband, oh, I was just at the Peyton Hall pool. So it was really fun to delve and dive back into those very golden but smoggy days.
Do you characters give their voices to you, their physical sounding voices to you, or do you verbalize that voice? Does it come into your head, or do you hear their sounds?
Well, when I write their dialogue, I can't say that I physically hear them, but I just feel like I know what they would say. And sometimes when I'm writing dialogue, I will read it aloud to make sure that it is true to the character who's speaking. And if I have an old farmer saying, "Methinks you look a little peaked this evening, Swain," I'll think, well, he probably wouldn't say that, at least not on a Minnesota farm. So I think that's also where acting is so helpful, because, especially improvisation, because you know in comedy, if you say something and you could have the word chicken, and if it's in the wrong place in the structure of the sentence, it wouldn't get any laugh. But if it's in a different place, people, so you're very aware of the rhythm of language and the emphasis, and how the exact right word in the exact right place can just really make things sparkle. So I really am grateful to my acting career. I feel it gives me a deeper assistance in writing dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Is there a favorite character's voice that, or a favorite improv voice that you have? I noticed you did the Norwegian woman talking about, not tooting your horn.
Oh, I love to do all different sorts of voices, and in my writing, I remember there's a character in Your Oasis on Flame Lake. Her name is Beatty, and she's a very spoiled woman who has gotten a lot of attention from her looks. She loves to take bubble baths and watch Elvis Presley movies in her bathtub, and she really thinks the world should revolve around her, and she has a daughter who doesn't fit her idea of what her daughter should be. So her, she was nasty, and it was really fun to write this because, as a mother, you always, sometimes what you're thinking might not be the wisest thing you would say to your children, but she's unfiltered, and it was really fun to write that way, without all the maternal, oh no, I can't say that to my daughter. But I guess, again, whatever I'm working on at the current time is my favorite voice. And because whatever I'm working on currently, I don't like to talk about, I can't tell you. I cannot tell you what that voice is, no.
Okay.
Sorry,
okay. Is there anything else you'd like to tell? I'm running out of questions, so.
Let's see. Well, I'm just thrilled about this September and the 2 books that'll be out. Do I have any travel plans? No, I want to go to France this year. So.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll ever happen, but, and I'm not talking about the Avenue in Edina.
No.
I would love to go to France. I have been, to Europe as a very young woman. I had my 18th birthday in a Swedish hostel, I remember. And we spent about a month in Paris, which was so much fun at 18, but I would love to go back there now and just wear a beret and eat some baguettes with a bottle of wine.
Oh, soak it up.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I think we'll wrap it up for today.
Okay.
I thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining us at BookBeat. We'll see you next time.